Well, let's start with resiliency and how to develop resiliency. Um, in fact, I'm going to open up that question too. If you guys have any thoughts on that, what has helped you basically develop resilience? Feel free to answer that question as it pops up. Um, that is such a good question and something that I know that we all would love to develop more of because let's be honest, life is hard and sometimes it hits us with some pretty good shots, right? And so what can we do? What can we do to correct that, right? Or to help develop that? Um, One of my favorite quotes is from Winston Churchill, who said, "Success is not final, failure is not fatal. It's the courage to continue that counts." And I think one of the things I wanted to just point out for any of us want to develop this is to also understand that you're doing better than you think. Resiliency is not getting knocked down, right? That's not resiliency. Resiliency is not never having a bad day. Resiliency is not never feeling discouraged or down. Resiliency is what happens when we get back up, right? And one of my another favorite quotes, right, from Rocky is, life is not all sunshine and rainbows, and it's going to hit hard. And life, it's not about how hard you can hit, but how hard you can get hit and keep moving forward. How much you can take and keep moving forward. So the fact that we're still here, that we're still trying, we're still pushing, is in essence resilient. And I think we need to kind of pat ourselves on the back a little bit more than we do and recognize, you know what? Yeah, I may be feeling down at times, I may be feeling discouraged, but I continue to get up every day, even if it's hard, and even if I don't want to, and I still keep pushing forward. And that's resilient, right? Now, obviously, we want to try to figure out, okay, how can we develop that a little bit better so that maybe we get to that place a little bit more, we can recover a little quicker. Um, I know that many of us probably struggle with feeling that we're resilient because we probably think, well, I'm not very resilient. I get down easy. I'm often discouraged. I don't bounce back very quick. But again, there's no time limit that says you have to bounce back within so many seconds in order to be qualified as resilient. No, it's just bouncing back is resilient, right? We just want to see if we can work on that, close the gap so we can do it a little quicker, right? And continue to develop that muscle. So again, you are resilient. Even if you don't feel that you are, you are. We just want to try to help you develop that muscle, basically. And that's the best way I think I've learned to look at resiliency, is it is a muscle. It's just like anything else that we have. It takes time to develop. And unfortunately, the only way to develop it is through resistance, right? By pushing through times where we don't want to get back up, times where we struggle, and it's hard. And so we need those moments, we need those times to develop that muscle. And so even when we're down and we feel discouraged, as long as we continue to move forward, get back up, keep going about our day in life as much as we can, we are developing that muscle as we do that and becoming more resilient in the process. Uh, Elder Dykes, a leader in my faith, told a great story about the most successful planes that were ever manufactured during World War II, and they were the Grumman Hellcat, which on record shot down 19 enemy planes for every Hellcat that was lost. I mean, this was quite an engineering feat. And the key to the success of this particular plane, which was designed by a Leo Grumman. It was his motto that was behind the design and the architecture and everything about this plane, was basically three things. He said, keep it simple, build it strong, and make it work. Keep it simple, make it strong, build it strong, and make it work. And that motto he referenced is a great model for us to kind of develop and to take into our lives to try to develop resiliency. Kind of ask ourselves those same questions. What can I do to simplify my life? Right? Sometimes it's hard to be resilient when we're spread so thin. There's so much going on. So, what can I do to simplify things? That's going to help me be better in the long run and to develop that resiliency. What can I do to strengthen myself, right? To build a better self. And you'll hear me talk about this a lot. If we're not building a better self, we're not building resiliency, right? So what are we doing to build a better self? Not build a better, our kids better, or our spouse better, or the neighbors better, or the church even better, but what are we doing to build a better self? And then last and not least, what can I do to keep it going, right? What actions can I take to make it work, right? We can have all the ideas and plans we want, but we need to take those little steps to make things work in order for that to really fully be developed. And he gave 5 suggestions. I'm going to give you these 5 because I think these are phenomenal when it comes to developing resiliency. He said, number 1, develop a core set of functional doctrines and principles as your personal code of conduct that nothing can shake or replace. This kind of becomes your foundation. And I think this is paramount to having when it comes to resiliency. Buildings that can survive earthquakes, it's because largely the foundation that they have. And ironically, the foundation is connected to the building in such a way that it allows for adjustment. It's flexible. And so I think as we try to develop key principles and core doctrines that we can take, and really they can help us to become flexible in whatever way, shape, or form life throws us curves, right? I love, as an example, one of my key tenets is in Christ's strength I can do all things, right? I love that. I've always just had that as a motto, and it's just kind of helped me to recognize and to remember when I get in those moments where, like, I don't know that I can do this. It reminds me, like, oh, you know what? I don't have to do this by myself. I'm not alone, and that I have help. And it helps me adjust a little bit my thinking when I'm in those moments where I'm like, I can't, I don't know how I'm going to pull this off. I don't know how I'm going to do it. No, you're right. I probably can't. But in his strength, I can. Another tenet I've always tried to live my life by is when you put God first, all other things fall into their proper place or drop out of our lives. When I make him a key, that's like a foundational principle for me. When I make him a core principle in what I do and make sure that I put him first, things tend to work out in the right way. And they may not always go in the way that I want, right? But I also know and trust that they will go in the way that I need. That's another kind of core tenet, is that trust that life is what's happening for you, not necessarily to you. Right? These kinds of foundational principles, when we have those, they can help us to bounce back when things don't quite go our way. Another one he said is to learn how to adapt and cope with changes. He explained that in nature, the species that survive challenges, right, are not the strongest, and they're not the smartest, but the ones that survive are those that can adapt and adapt to a changing environment. And that's a part of what we need to learn to develop. We just do in life. If I had a nickel for every time I thought, my life would go a certain way and it didn't, I'd be a rich man, like all of us. We need to learn to kind of go with the flow a little bit. There's a whole thing that I do in teaching people I work with about the difference between living by intention, living with intention, living with expectation. So many of us live with expectations. They're so hard and so rigid, and that's what makes our buildings just crumble, because they're not able to be flexible and go with the flow, and life goes this way or that way. And so learning how to adapt and cope with those changes is huge. And I have a whole course and program I can help you with those, but that's paramount. Number 3, never lose sight of your purpose on earth and your divine destiny. We're going to talk a little bit tonight about purpose. I think that's key, and we need to understand what that is and know what that is and keep it in the forefront of our minds. Number 4 was to find an exercise regimen. And I love this one. Like, building resiliency in the mind can be largely accomplished in building muscles in the body. Right? Building resiliency in the way that we are physically. There are so many great benefits to come from exercise and working out, and it helps develop the muscle of the mind as much as we're developing the muscle of the body, right? And so developing that kind of exercise regimen, working muscles, really does help improve the brain's thinking process with increased resilience. And then the last one is, he says, just choose happiness, right? And we all have the opportunity every single day to choose happiness. It's a choice. And that's going to come up later on as we talk about as well. But those are just 5 great suggestions. And I think the biggest lesson I've learned about resiliency is just, again, as I've kind of referenced, partnering with God in the process. When I was on my mission quite some time ago, I remember one experience, really above a lot of them, where I was when I was riding my bike. As new missionaries, we were on bikes. In fact, we split the area. We had half the time we had a car, half the time we had bikes. And we made the mistake the first time we made that transition of setting some appointments in our car way too far away. We didn't really pay attention. Like, oh, we're not going to have a car when we set these appointments. We're going to have to ride our bike all the way there. We were young teenagers, and but that's what we did. And so we set those appointments. Didn't have the car the next week because we were sharing it with another companionship close by. So we had to ride our bikes, and it just so happened that this was like the only place in Mississippi where there were any hills. That's where I served my mission. And so we're going up and down these hills, and it was late at night, and I remember it was getting cold, and then I'm riding my bike, it started to rain, and I was miserable. And I remember thinking to myself, what am I doing? Why am I here? Right? What is this? And I was like, I hate this. This is not fun. This is not... I was tired, I was cold, and I was wet. And, for a teenager, I should be out with my friends. I should be out, watching TV, getting food, whatever. And here I am riding my bike to an appointment to teach somebody about the gospel. And I remember thinking to myself, why am I doing this? And I just had the thought came into my mind, you're doing this for me. And that thought just changed everything. I can't even begin to tell you. Like, the feeling that overcame me in that instant as a young person, I was no longer tired. I was no longer cold. And I could care less about being wet. I found a reason and a purpose behind what I was doing. And I was doing it for him. And there's a scripture in my faith that talks about having our pain swallowed up in the joy of Christ. And I experienced that firsthand. And that was one of the greatest lessons I've learned about resiliency. Like, I was on my way down. I was not liking what I was experiencing, and I didn't want to get up. I was having a hard time with everything. But that thought, right, that I'm going through this, what I'm doing for him. And I think that can apply to a lot of us in so many different situations and settings, right? I know many that I've talked to are just overwhelmed with being a mother, taking care of their kids, right, and all that comes along with that. And we'll talk a little bit about that too in just a moment. But again, that thought, you're doing this for him, right? Or fathers that are just overworked and trying to provide for their family and a good life, for their spouse and their kids. Same thing. You're doing this for him. Those that are stretched really thin because of church and callings and all this kind of stuff we have going on, right? You're doing this for him. All the things that we're doing for him. The way that we help other people, the responsibilities we have often can be tied back to him. And so that's an important, for me, component of resiliency, is making sure that what I'm doing in my life has some kind of connection and purpose to him. Because if it does, then he will help me to be resilient. And my resilience will come from him. As he swallows up my pain, as he swallows up my frustration and my discouragement, and helping me to remember and be reminded of why I'm doing what I'm doing. Even if it's not the most prestigious, fun, exciting thing in the world, when it's tied to him, it's worth it. It will be worth it. And so I love that. Those are just a few thoughts that came to mind when I thought about the concept of resiliency. And anyway, I hope some of those are helpful. I'm just going to pop here to the questions. And I'm still trying to work this out. Rochelle, I developed my resiliency a lot. A lot of it's actual pain through hardship, right, and how to overcome it. That's I think a key point to keep in mind with resiliency is we're going to get knocked down. We're going to fall, and we just learn to get back up, right? And no matter how long it takes, as long as we keep getting up, that's resiliency. And recognizing that our trials are what makes us stronger, as Jen said. Such a great thought, right? Um, that even if we have a bad day, that tomorrow can be better. Aren't we glad that God created life in segments like days? I think we need that, right? He knew that like one day, 16-hour period is about all we could probably handle, and so we could go to sleep, we could recover, and we just wake up and like, there's another chance. I can get back up, I can get out of bed. I just love the way that the life has been designed that way, almost to help ease us into resiliency, right? Every day, just here you go, there's another chance. Get back up, just get back up out of bed. Every day you get out of bed, you're developing resiliency. So anyway, there's some thoughts on resiliency. This next one